Hello, everyone, and welcome to Wowhead Weekly number 262.
Yeah.
Good, okay. I didn't double check the number before, so that happens. This week is a pretty special one as we got 9.05 confirmed for next reset, which is Tuesday for NA and Wednesday for EU. And that's exciting. And it means that we got to talk about all the things that we can expect to come and what other thoughts that might be interesting around it. So, before we jump into anything though, let me quickly introduce myself. I'm Annie, or also known as Annie Fuchsia, and I'm a full time streamer on Twitch, playing lots and lots of World of Warcraft. So, getting excited to see a few more things that we can play around with. As usual, I have my very lovely co host, Perculia.
Hey everyone, I'm Perk. Sometimes I'm joined by Brightpaw, but he's off in a corner right now. And yeah, I am the director for Wowhead. I oversee all the guides and news and features, and it's always fun to do this show, be in front of the camera, not just behind the scenes, once a week to share the highlights of what our community is talking about. We have 905, which kind of appeared out of nowhere, and then we also have some big discussion topics in the last week, like the Hall of Fame filling up as a side effect of RMT, a survey that was leaked, maybe hinting that some classic changes are coming, and the usual report that subscriber numbers are down. So yeah, let's discuss 905 first. It's a pretty small patch, but in spite of that, I think it's just interesting as to like why this sort of small patch even uh, exists, because we haven't
Mm-hmm.
had something like this at the start of an expansion before.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so 905 is this week, and we learned about it I think like Thursday evening. So
Yep.
yeah, it's so soon.
It's very
Yeah.
fast. We kind of expected it to come next week. We did expect it to be around mid March, but we expected it to be later mid March rather than early mid March. So this was quite surprising, but it's I guess nice to see that things are being quickly delivered, but at the same time, it makes you wonder: are things ready? Because we have some examples here which showed up really, really late on the PTR, so it makes us wonder if maybe we're going a little bit too fast. Maybe Blizzard needs to double check everything. Are they actually ready, or are they rushing things? That's
Yeah.
one of the big topics here. The Mythic Plus gearing is probably a hot topic for most people. Valor points being added to the gearing system, making Mythic Plus a little bit more similar in gearing to PvP, but not exactly the same, of course. And yeah, so how are the Valor points going to play out? Do we know exactly how it's going to work, but based on how it is now on PTR? Because it
Uh,
seems like things are still changing.
yeah.
Like there was a
So
cap,
yeah,
and then that was removed.
yeah, so just to back up a bit, if you've taken a break from Shadowlands and you're like, oh, this is the first patch, like, new quest, the BlizzCon line stuff. This is not the big BlizzCon line patch. This is
Oh yeah.
a small systems patch that mostly just targets like Covenant tuning for the worst ones, and then this Mythic Plus gearing system.
Mm-hmm.
So we know some things for sure. We know that you can upgrade your gear up to item level 220, and that you have like a certain you need to do a certain number of keystones at a high level to unlock the ability to upgrade at a higher item level. So you can't just never do like a keystone 10 and then upgrade your gear. You have to have the achievement unlocked.
Mm-hmm.
We know most of the costs. Some users have been really helpful testing things on the PTR, but not all, because there's not been a blue post. And we have a general sense of how many points you can earn in the first week and how it expands over time. But we're still missing a lot of pieces of critical info, such as how many Valor points you can get from a Mythic Plus dungeon. There used to be a cap on the PTR, but then we noticed a few days ago that the tooltip description had changed,
Mm-hmm.
so maybe that cap is gone. And then there's also the hot topic of, well, how come I can only upgrade to 220? Why not 226 to be on par with gear from other systems? And if you look at the data mining, there are ranks in the data for it to go up to 226. So people are wondering if it will show up in a future patch. And then, of course, as a reminder, something that people are sad about, all the Mythic Plus gear you've collected before 905, as well as your Great Vault loot from the day the patch goes live, that is not eligible to be upgraded. So you shouldn't be like, oh, I'm gonna, I've got this trinket I really like, but it's bad level, I'll just pour all my valor into it day one and have an amazing trinket. That's not how it works. You need to farm up that item again.
Yeah, so that's one part which is quite a downside actually, because you may have spent so much time into Mythic Plus already, and having this sort of fix, we call it fix with the speech marks, because is it really a fix when it forces you to do the same content again? And at the end of the day, at this point, most people have decent gear. I mean, it could be
We
decent.
just had a big push week too, so you could see,
Yeah.
a lot of people might be like, oh, I'm glad I did more Mythic Plus than usual. I'm glad I can't use any of this.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I do feel like I think we talked about this vaguely in the past, and I think that there could be a technical restriction which makes it harder for
Mm.
Blizzard to make that old gear um, upgradable, because it may look like the same item, but coding wise they're completely different. Um, so I think maybe they figured that it won't be a huge issue, so it's not worth the time investment to fix that coding part of it. I know that they did fix it for a corruption system that had a similar issue where you couldn't put the corruption scrolls, the things that were added to the vendor, in a later patch, and then that was fixed later on. Not sure if they'll go back and fix this, but it's must be quite daunting. Playing lots and
Mm.
lots of Mythic Plus and having those pieces of gear and then not be able to upgrade it. Also,
Right.
because there's potentially some limits of Valor points, it's not like you can upgrade everything at once, anyways. So I don't see the problem with being able to use the previous gear. I think they should have probably put some time into fixing that.
Yeah. So, in addition to the Mythic Plus system, which it definitely seems needed, but there are still some questions surrounding the rate of acquisition and why you can't upgrade it to 226 even though the data has the item scaling up to 226.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the other things that are coming, which also had some controversy, are the covenant tuning abilities. The reason I was surprised the patch was so soon was some of the covenant abilities got reworks, the Necrolord one, and the Necrolord rogue rework wasn't on the PTR until after the notes after until the release date came out. So there
Yeah.
really wasn't much time to, test that at all. And I think maybe Blizzard should figure out a new spin on testing things, because if not many people know how much Valor you get, for a Mythic Plus, or, this ability is only on the PTR for a few days to test, to me that shows that they don't really expect people to do much testing, or there hasn't been much testing going on.
Mm-hmm.
So that doesn't seem great for a patch that's meant to be about balance and getting people to try out new covenants if no one is, really testing out this PTR.
Yeah. No,
So
definitely. It does become a little bit worrying, especially if something ends up being too strong or too disappointing, or any kind of extreme would not be very nice for people.
yeah. But in addition to that, like I said, it's a pretty small patch, but there are some things that are standing out. There's some new anima powers if to help against classes that aren't having fun in Torghast. There's some legendary tuning. That doesn't seem as much of a big deal as the Covenant tuning, because at this point many people have made, lots of legendaries. Um, there is an interesting thing with potency conduits. More of them will drop in Castle Nathria, and Sire Denathrius is going to drop all the ones from the world bosses. So that seems to
Mm-hmm.
be like a small kind of quality of life improvement that kind of went under the radar.
Mm-hmm.
Rhinestone sunglasses can be transmogged, and the undead cloaks now match your bones because before, like, your bone disintegrationness wasn't really lining up with the cloak, but
Yeah.
that has been addressed too. And there's also a mount that we like unlocked the secret to, and then Blizzard changed it the next like day, tied to Torghast. So who knows what's going on with that mount? It's another Shadehound mount.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, I thought it might be interesting to discuss like uh sort of what is the context for this point 0.5 patch, because we haven't had too many point 0.5 patches, and like they've been a thing later in Blizzard's development, but they've like introduced very different types of content, like like in Legion, the point 0.5 patch was when you would get the raid. Like,
Mm-hmm.
7.2 was the new content, and then the point 0.5 was the raid.
Mm-hmm.
And then in BFA, like point 0.5 was the like mini raid or the Sour Fang cinematic.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but this is different. So yeah, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I was thinking, if you look at it from like sort of bird's eye view, the only real new thing that we're getting is the new gearing system that's being added, which is mainly targeted at people who are playing Mythic Plus. But I noticed that there were some other sources for it too. Like you get, what was it, 35 or 45 valor for completing a calling. Uh,
Yeah, that very different ones. Yeah.
yeah, Blizzard, can we get anima from that too, please? That'd be great. But I think I think they realized I'm guessing they realized the feedback coming from Mythic Plus and how successful PvP has been, which is a good thing in itself, right? But sometimes a success of one thing can also mean that another part of the game is failing. So maybe they felt like the Mythic Plus side is failing and people are not enjoying it much because it doesn't give much incentive, whereas PvP gives so much incentive to play. So maybe they felt like this is an urgent fix that we need to put into the game. We're not going to wait until the next patch. We need to fix it now. And with that, maybe they felt it's big enough of a difference, big enough of a system that they want to see a taste of it before the real rate comes, or the new tier comes, sorry. Because my guess is this is kind of like the test run for it. And then when the new tier comes out with 9.1, my guess is that's when they will fine polish it. So we're kind of like being little test rabbits here, uh, being tested on this Valor Point system, capping it to 20 and things like that. I think that might also be why they're not changing it to 226, because they want to see how this plays out, if it feels okay, and then they might change things for the 9.1 instead. I think at this point they are eyeing 9.1, but because of the overhaul and to give a lot of attention to this new system, because it means your old gear doesn't matter, you need to farm new ones, you need a new one to be able to upgrade it, because that aspect of it is so big. I think that's why they felt like they needed to call it a 0.5 patch, whereas the rest of the tuning and everything could have been simple little hotfix patches.
Yeah. One thing that always worries me, like I think the Valor points are a great addition, but it seems that, Blizzard kind of falls into this trap where they make systems, and then they're like, these systems will last the expansion, and
Mm-hmm.
then when the expansion is over they have to make new temporary systems, and
Mm-hmm.
if they don't work out they band-aid it, with like the Netherlight Crucible or the Azurite essences.
Mm-hmm.
And with Shadowlands they were saying that they're trying to have systems that last longer.
Yeah.
um
Because
and
this is kind of like
they
a band-aid to the Mythic Plus gearing,
Yeah,
actually.
and
Because
yet
it's,
now
yeah.
we have a new Valor system. And with BlizzCon Line, there was also hints in interviews that they want to like go back to Warlord style PvP, or add some little benefits to raid gear to make that the best for raiding. And
Mm-hmm.
then, you're just like, are these new systems again, and will they last moving forward, or are these band-aids again? And when at BlizzCon Line they start saying, oh, we're not ready to discuss systems, we want to see how the PTR turns out, you start thinking like, do they have something bigger with systems? Are they
Mm-hmm.
revising the systems? I get you just you just worry that they like keep adding these little band-aids onto expansion specific systems that are going to be removed, and then they have to like reinvent the wheel, next expansion. And is
Mm-hmm.
that like the best, is that the best use of the time? So I just hope that I don't know, just like more stability, or like building upon a strong system instead of constantly trial and erroring into something good, or if
Mm-hmm.
it's bad they slap something on. Like it's just like they're just sort of like tearing things down and then like trying to rebuild the same thing over and over each expansion.
Yeah, no, that's a really good way of looking at it. I do feel like the Valor Point system is it's in a sense a band-aid to what's happening now, but I think it's a very solid one,
Yeah, yeah.
as it is one that we've had in the past as well. So I think it could end up being a good pillar that we could potentially, hopefully, keep over the not just course of the expansion, but over expansions. I think that
Mm.
would be great because yeah, that stability is nice to have. It's nice to have working systems and then have some things on top of it, which makes it spicy and specific to the expansion. But it's also nice to have more stronger pillars in the first place, and I think they're trying it with this. I think they're trying it. I think this type of band aid is better than, oh, nothing works, so let's introduce corruption gear, and then
Yeah, and like corruption was really elaborate too. Like we
yeah.
had like Azerite essences in 8.2, and then corruption in 8.3, and all of those additions were just like very elaborate that only lasted not even a year.
Mm-hmm.
So Valor Point seems like it will have more longevity, hopefully, because the Mythic Plus system is sticking around between expansions. So hopefully that means Valor points will be as well. It's just
Mm-hmm.
funny because it's like Valor points were from an old expansion and they're making a return. WAD style PvP gearing, people like that back in the day. That could be making a return. So maybe Blizzard should take a hard look at systems that worked and not just get rid of them for the sake of introducing something new.
Mm-hmm.
When there's a new expansion, maybe some things can hold over.
Mm-hmm.
um the so we even though we've had point 0.5 patches before, the fact that we're having one like 4 months into Shadowlands, and we don't really know anything about the next big patch, of course, makes people think of the question, is Blizzard behind with development, like either
Mm-hmm.
due to COVID or
For the
other
9-1.
factors.
Mm-hmm.
Like Blizzard has said, oh, we're trying to invest in developers, but then obviously, if you're going to cut community and other departments, that affects the production and leadership and deadlines. Especially if you're working from home, or real life is stressful. All the things we've heard about salaries, maybe being low for the area, lots of factors that could be affecting focus. And patch 901 announcements seem light at BlizzCon Line. We didn't really have any like footage of the patch. Obviously, no demo. It was like concept art.
Yeah.
905 doesn't have a ton of content. So, I think that
There's
this
actually
is
no
like a
content.
solid, yeah, this is a solid round of changes, and it's good they're trying to make Necrolords more hype and fix legendary balance. But
Mm-hmm.
when people see this build as like a point 0.5 patch, and they think of something like 805 815 that had Crucible of Storm raid, or 825 that was like Sourfang War Campaign,
Mm-hmm.
people are worrying that Shadowlands has slower development after a really promising, or you could even argue a rush start. Remember, we were all like, why is this launching on an American holiday with the Mythic raid
Yeah.
around Christmas?
Mm-hmm.
um why are they trying to cram it in then? And now we're like, okay, renown level capped out at 40, like no new quests, like it's very it was like too much, and now it's like too little.
Mm-hmm.
So do you think that they got behind on development with COVID, or like they realized the systems were more complex? What do you think's going on?
I think it's definitely possible that things have been delayed a little bit, which might be the reason why the 9.05 patch was mentioned in the first place. Maybe they needed this patch because, like, going back to your original question of um, why did we have an '05 patch, maybe they needed a patch after BlizzCon. Maybe they needed something after BlizzCon to for us to not feel like, hello, what's happening? Nothing going on.
Right.
Because if you think about it, 9.05, except for the new system change with Mythic Plus gearing, everything else is mostly just tuning and slight changing, which doesn't necessarily give anyone more content. Might make some specs or some things play a little bit differently, but that's actually it. So maybe 9.05 was a little sort of desperate patch to throw in there to have something to feel like it's new. Because when something is a new patch, it always brings some excitement. People want to see and try the things that are announced for it, such as the Mythic Plus thing. And yeah, maybe this is a filler because 9.1 is more delayed than they expected. And if that is the
Yeah.
case, it's sad because we were saying that they could have just waited with the first raid and everything until January.
Yeah, I mean, looking back, I think Mop had Mop had the staggered raid release. Like there was a ton of bosses. Like, we had 3 raids of bosses at the start of Mop. Like looking back, that just sounds like, whoa, like how do you just had so many things to do at the same time. And then in WAD, of course, you had the selfie patch, which people kind of, ridiculed. But even then, I think, WAD came out in November, and then by March, I want to say we had the second raid, Blackrock Foundry. So even that was like a pretty fast turnaround compared to what we're getting now of,
Yeah.
November to March.
Mm-hmm.
And then Legion, we knew about 7-1 and Karazhan before the expansion even came out. And, maybe Blizzard like went a little too far with Legion where they really wanted to show they were back on their game after WAD and they were like, really trying to pump things out and be like, oh, we're back with content. The expansion isn't even out, and we've got a patch
Yeah.
trailer and
Mm-hmm.
Karazhan. Like, we were seeing footage of 7-1 before we even saw Legion. And then with
Mm-hmm.
BFA,
It's so funny to be
yeah,
reminded of the contrasts like that.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then like BFA, we had the 8-1 Darkshore uh patch. We had that
Mm-hmm.
cinematic at BlizzCon, and that launched in December. So we had expansion release August, and then December we were doing like the Hive Mind and the Darkshore Warfront, and then Desart Allure was delayed until, was it January or February? So all that, when you put that in contrast, it just seems kind of different to what we have going on with Shadowlands right now. And I think people were really hyped for Shadowlands because there was a lot of potential with like old characters coming back, and
Mm-hmm.
like weird new zones we could be exploring, or like the lore of Ouroboros. Like there was a lot of high potential. So I think there's some worry that people don't want Shadowlands to be a Warlords where maybe like development dragged on, so there was a big wait between
Yeah.
patches, and then like how like the Netherstorm part of Warlords kind of got cut. I think people are worried that they don't want cool stuff to be cut in Shadowlands because COVID made like the schedule drag on too long, and Blizzard had to move on to the next thing.
Yeah. We
Um,
want everything to be explored because we're probably not going to stay in Shadowlands for longer than the expansion. So we want to see everything that there is to see because it's going to be difficult to go back later to discover new things. So it has to be done now.
yeah.
And
So
like you said, the potential of old characters is endless. They could make story
yeah,
about anything. So it's yeah, it's just wherever your fancy takes you could happen.
yeah, like I keep seeing interviews where they're like, "Oh, we don't really have time to go into Varian story or Sour Fangs." That makes me sad because like you'd think that they were like all the expansions recently have been tied together, and you'd think that those characters are so significant with
Mm.
past arcs that it would make sense for them to have their finale in Shadowlands, with how monumental their death was, and how they were like Blansamdi using Sourfang to like you know hype up Sakan to help him, or Varian the image, beyond, he's inspiring Anduin from beyond the grave. You'd think that they would show up, and it just seems that this is a unique opportunity to tell a lot of stories that otherwise they couldn't.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll see where that goes, but I just hope that they can tell the full story that they want. And I'm sure that Blizzard probably can't say this publicly, but I think it would be fascinating to have like a breakdown or postmortem of what do they think really worked with Shadowlands development wise. Like, what do game studios think improves with remote work, and what do they think has really suffered or has taken longer? Because it
Yeah.
seems like art
Mm-hmm.
wise, The Wandering Ancient was like, oh yeah, designers are ahead of schedule, let's make them out. So,
Yeah, that's a
you
good
know,
point. Mm-hmm.
yeah.
In
So like maybe
comparison.
if you're doing art, like it's better that you can work from wherever as long as you have the resources and you share
Mm.
them on a meeting. But maybe if you're a designer and you need like the playtesting feedback, uh, maybe maybe that's where things fail. Maybe Blizzard should look into things like, I don't know, like paying people to test things and they've got like their camera out on Zoom or something, or they're answering questionnaire, like something where they can gauge reactions in person, or do interviews if people aren't spending a ton of time on the PTR, but they need that feedback, or they need to like see the human reactions to know if a
Mm-hmm.
system makes sense or not.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I just want the expansion, to do well.
Yeah, that's what we
So
all want at the end of the day. We want it to do well. We want all the ideas that have been put in to become something, to be complete.
yeah, like
No
going
rushing.
back to Warlords, like there were a lot of signs and rumors pointing to an alternate Shatrath style content raid where we'd learn more about like Durell and the Draenei, and even the final boss of Warlords was changed from what they announced at Gamescom, and there was like a data mine, Gorehowl legendary. So, you just want to make sure that all the stories are explored to their full potential, and, there's no, like, you know, missing plot hole or raid that would have been cool but had to be cut because, COVID went on too long.
Mm-hmm.
So, also, as we're discussing this, I just want to, as a heads up, we were discussing Valor. Blizzard released a blue post just now mentioning
Oh,
that the Valor cap change that we noticed is intended. So there
okay.
should be a new updated blue post on Wowhead covering this. So yeah, so the blue post states that yeah, this is correct. There will not be a limit of 1,500 Valor that can be held. I put a strike through on that part of the original post. So basically, you could earn more than 1,500 Valor, but you would have to like spend it in that increment. So you could like earn like 3,000 a week, but you would have to, you know, only hold 1,500. They've removed that now, so you can stockpile thousands of Valor now, which I think seems good if you're not sure like what to
Yeah, if
update
you're not sure
first.
what to upgrade, yeah, no, I think that's really good. I think it's silly
Yeah.
to have a cap like that because it does nothing except force you to decide fast. And
Yeah, and it's like it's
yeah,
really confusing. It's like, oh, like, you can earn more than that per week, but you can't hold on to it, so you have to keep spending it as you earn it.
yep.
So, yep. So yeah, so when do you think we'll see 9.1? Like either the PTR going up or like the patch dropping with
Ooh,
all this 905, delay talk.
yeah. I was originally thinking that it might happen in May, but now it feels like it's impossible. So probably June. I don't know. Do you think July is even possible, or what do you think?
So I feel like kind of like the movie schedule, like June is when you drop like the summer blockbusters towards the end of June. And I feel like Blizzard has sort of rushed to get things out by the end of June before, like the Nashatar patch, that was also June.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think that since 9.1 has, already had more development than past patches, more time between launch, that June is pretty generous for them. I do think that there was like an arena slide from BlizzConline that was talking about the second circuit, the summer season starting, I think, end of June or July.
Oh,
So maybe that would line up with any major class changes for that.
yeah,
um
that's true.
but
And
yeah.
the ending season of Arena is usually, is it usually a week before the patch ends?
Usually the season ends. Usually at the end of season, 2 week cutoff, like that
That's
is
it.
usually
Yeah.
that's like 2 weeks for the patch.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can't imagine the second season they'd be playing with like old gear and covenants and all that. So
Mm-hmm.
my guess is that would be end of June.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think just the way finances work, it's like them, you want to rush to get things out before Christmas in quarter
Mm-hmm.
four. But Americans, you also want to rush to get things out in June to take advantage of people having more free time after Memorial Day. um like it's kind of funny. You're like, oh yeah, the people will be at home, but with COVID, everyone's at home. But it's it's just a time where like more people think about like vacations or splurging on money again, or like long
Mm-hmm.
weekends going into July 4th.
Mm-hmm.
I also think that we're gonna have TBC as a wild card in there. We're gonna drop like TBC as a something interesting to uh get people not bored, keep them playing WoW.
I think I accidentally cut you off there for like a second, so it
Oh
shouldn't
no.
have been too bad. But
Yeah.
I'm aware that happened, but she should be good now. Yeah, there we go.
Sorry. But
No,
yeah, and I think that TBC will be like a interesting thing they'll drop for the
that is a
retail
very,
crowd.
very good point. I think Blizzard might maybe kind of get away with things being a bit late in dates because of TBC also being in the middle in all of that. So do you think TBC will be before or after 9.1?
So I think it's gonna be like 9:05's gonna drop,
Mm-hmm.
and then it's so I think what's gonna happen is that they said that the 9.1 PTR was gonna go up soon after 9:05. So I think that in March, like we might get a 9.1 drop, but it's gonna be just things like models, or like it's gonna be like hype. Like when 825 first came out, like we just data mined, Rathian and Kalia,
Mm-hmm.
and like Valir, and that was it. And then like there was nothing on the PTR for a month. I think they're gonna do one of those like uh cool graphics patches, data mining dumps. But
At the end of
then
this
I think
month.
yeah, but then
Mm-hmm.
I think they're gonna then pivot to like TBC, have a few weeks of like TBC invite
Mm-hmm.
waves, and then after a few weeks of that hype, they'll be like, oh yeah, the 9.1 systems. We don't just have cool models in the model viewer, and then they'll drop more gearing things. So I think that they're going to just drop something as like a teaser on the PTR, and then once people are like thinking about WoW again, do TBC. And then when TBC hype dies down, do more of the 9.1 stuff, and hopefully TBC will buy them times to like really iron out the systems they want to do. But yeah, I don't think we're getting like Sanctum of Domination raid testing. I mean, like we couldn't even see pictures of the
Yeah, I
raid.
know. They actually showed nothing.
It was
Mm-hmm.
like black and white. And like normally, like we were talking about past patches, they always had a little patch trailer at, the Gamescom or BlizzCon where you saw the footage.
Mm-hmm.
But with Chains of Domination, like we just have, concept art of these places. We couldn't even get like a little 5-second video clip of a mount running through, which just was very few pictures of what was coming.
Mm-hmm. I wonder if this potential TBC drop will mean that 9.1 has to wait until July.
Hmm.
What do you think? Do you think that's
Yeah,
possible?
I mean, they do have two separate teams working on things. I feel like seeing how Shadowlands, like they really push for quarter 4. I think hopefully they could learn their lesson if they feel they have to drop something in June, not drop everything in June. Like they could do a staggered release where the raid opens in July.
Yeah, that's
If
true.
that's the case.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it would still
Um,
overlap over to July, but not necessarily the first release of it. That could work.
yeah. Yeah, and I know with the beta, like the classic beta, went on for a really long time. Um, so I wonder what they'll be doing with TBC, especially if they want to try out, some changes.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just about recreating things how they were. It's about, you know, uh, getting things how they were, but then also
Slight
testing
improvements.
the
Mm-hmm.
impact, like the butterfly effect. Like something might be good if you just change a profession. You're like, oh, we solved one problem in a raid, but then it's like, well, did we just, create
Create new
another
problems.
if
Yeah.
right, yeah. Like, is it still good for everyone to have this profession? Like now do we, make 20 people pick up a different profession? I'm curious what will happen with that, but definitely feel like Blizzard will use TBC to fill in some of the Shadowlands gaps.
Mm-hmm. I think that's how they originally planned things, at least. I think the reason why Shadowlands um, and Classic Nax kind of overlapped was because Shadowlands was delayed, whereas Nax wasn't. I think it would disappoint the Classic community too much if they would change the schedule because Shadowlands was delayed. Um,
Mm.
but I think in terms of initial planning, they are probably trying to separate them. So maybe that means we could expect TBC in May or so.
Yeah, I don't think that TBC would go live in May just because like we'd have a very short beta, but I can
Yeah.
definitely see like, testing going on in May. They also have the pre-patch to drop for TBC like when people can activate their 58 boost.
Yep.
So, maybe that could go live in May, but I can't see them like even at BlizzCon Line. Remember that like one day they're like, "Oh yeah, this is going to be our patch breakdown." Then the next day they're like, "Oh yeah, we changed it." It seems like they're
Yeah.
still sorting out some their approach to the game.
Mm-hmm.
So, another thing I wanted to discuss with the patch was the Blizzard communication because it seems that on one hand they are doing something right by their near weekly raid or alt friendly improvements. Like we got Sanguine Depths tuning, we got some raid nerfs this past Tuesday.
Mm-hmm.
um but then we have this other type of communication where they announce the patch date before a big covenant rework is on the PTR, or they, announce Valor points, but they leave out information in a blue post, or like the Valor cap change thing. They actually changed it on Thursday. We reported on it yesterday, and now people are confused. So there was a blue post on it. So it seems like they're reacting to live changes better, but the PTR still could use better communication.
Yeah.
Um, like it's just if people don't know the rate of acquisition, we might know the cost for upgrading Valor now, or we know that you can get 5,000 in the first week, but like that's meaningless. Like if you don't know how much you get from Mythic Plus or how it feels after a certain number of runs.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I don't know. It's like I sort of wonder if the patch would be better on the 16th just to fine tune some of these things. Like I know our writers were, pretty stressed when, we're like, hey, like, please tell us what the best covenant is. And people are like, well, I don't know what it is. It's just been
Haven't had
changing. Or,
time.
yeah, no
Yeah.
one's going to pick plus on the
Yeah.
PTR. Or
They
the
just
biggest
added
example,
another change yesterday. Might change
yeah.
everything now.
The thing which I thought was a little confusing was the PTR notes, like, they're massive, and we run a tool to compare the old and new versions, and this bit snuck in where the formula for the weekly keystone was changing, and it wasn't very alt friendly, and it was a
Oh
change to a
yeah.
system that people really liked in Shadowlands, and like that wasn't a separate blue post or anything. Like that was just like, oh yeah, in the middle we noticed that this, sentence was added that's very unpopular.
Yeah.
And
I saw it on Twitter.
yeah,
Everyone in
someone could
fuming.
argue like, yeah, people could be like, well, the PTR is for testing. Like, obviously, if you didn't notice it, then that means like it wasn't a big deal, or like, if you're not running the content on the PTR, clearly you don't care about it. So I can see people trying to say that, but I do think that you're asking people to test things on the PTR for free. It's
Yep.
good if you make a post highlighting this change, being like, hi, you might not run Mythic Plus on the PTR for funsies, but
This is
we
the
want to test
case.
out this change.
Yep.
Because it definitely felt like
It's a
it
huge
flew under the
change.
radar. Like
Mm-hmm.
no one knew when it was added, and then it was like, oh no, people are all in uproar. We're gonna, change this to something else. And yeah, it just just was sort of a puzzling example of communication, and maybe if there was an extra week they could have properly gathered feedback or made another blue post just announcing why they wanted to do this, or like what problem it would solve.
Mm-hmm.
Because it seems that based on community feedback they reverted the change to something much better. But it's just like, it shouldn't just be this outrage cycle where people stumble on something at the last minute, and if it gets panicky enough, it gets escalated to change.
Mm-hmm.
So
Because that's the
uh
problem too. A lot
yeah.
of people feel like when they have feedback for something, unless they make a huge sort of controversial topic out of it, it's hard to get changes to happen.
Mm.
And this kind
Yeah.
of feeds that idea too, that because it became such a big deal, yeah, we had to look at that. Um, and then there's other things that are not covered at all or not talked about.
Yeah, when you mentioned making the feedback into something controversial, that honestly reminded me of character customizations, because like Blizzard said, "Oh yeah, based on feedback, we're not doing anymore," and everyone was like, "Oh, like I'm a really passionate RP, or I'm an artist. I gave lots of feedback during the beta. Was I not
Was wasting my time.
set enough? Yeah, exactly. Was I wasting my time? Did I need to sound angrier? Do I need to make a Reddit
Oh,
post?" Like, it's because a lot of people were like, I gave
yeah.
feedback, like, I wanted Nightborn to get options, some human options are available on some ethnicities but not others. I'd like
Yeah.
this other race doesn't have too many options, and a lot of people have felt like their feedback was ignored, or like Blizzard is sort of on their own
Mm.
schedule.
Like they're not
So
heard because they're not
right.
making a big thing out of it.
Right, and there is a sense where people are like, oh, like, I hope Wowhead picks up on this change, because if it makes it to Wowhead, then like enough people will like realize it's an issue and say something.
Yeah.
Um, so, but yeah, I do think that having a week, like maybe they could have announced the patch on Thursday, but given people another week, that could have made sense. I mean, obviously, Blizzard is not, paying guide writers, but there is a sense where, you want to put your best foot forward with the game, and you don't want abilities to feel like rushed, or,
Mm-hmm.
untested, or people saying like they don't know because something is buggy. So it's just good to have things being polished.
Mm-hmm.
uh but yeah, I mean, I know, obviously, going back to what we were saying, how Blizzard in recent years does not have as much community, or they're more like, public relations or like publishing. But it was good, I think, when you had one person that was always babysitting the patch notes, or compiling feedback, or trying to get explanations from the developers. And maybe that's like, it's not trendy, or it doesn't fit in with like, mainstream career paths, or Twitch culture, but I do think it's still important for this game to have explanations, and like Riot does that really well when they do champion changes. They always explain why they're trying something, so even if people disagree with the change, they can be like, yeah, like, I agree this is a problem, let's see if we can do something about it.
Yeah.
That made me think of the Riot MMO. Like, I think that if Riot
Yeah,
tries
did
an
we get any
MMO,
more information on
yeah.
that?
Blue, they opened up hiring recently.
Mm.
And it was making me think how everyone liked Ghostcrawler's communication style at Blizzard, and he's over at Riot, and people already like how Riot communicates about their other games. And obviously, that game is like really still far off, but Blizzard should start thinking about that. How if Riot does an MMO and they're better at communicating class balance or testing, or the devs, sound more approachable and it's more old school communication, that's something that Blizzard should take note about and
Yeah,
try to
definitely.
improve. Another
Mm-hmm.
reason why they should improve.
Mm-hmm. That could be some good competition if it manages.
Yeah. So, yeah, so that's basically 905. It's a small patch, but it's still, I think it's needed, especially 4 months in. Also, keep in mind you can get the Wandering Ancient if you log in and you're subscribed. The new mount.
Now?
Oh no, with the patch
Oh, yeah,
tomorrow.
yeah, yeah. Okay. I
Yeah.
was like, wait,
So
did
that's
I forget to do it?
yeah. And as far as our guide writers, we have an article up this morning on the best covenant for your class in Raid and Mythic Plus. Some of them have changed because of the Necro Lord reworks, and some buffs. Um, we have also been updating our other class guide pages if the buffs and nerfs have led to any strengths and weaknesses that are different than 9.0. We have new valor point sections on our gear pages explaining what you should decide to upgrade first, if like eye level is important, or if you want a weapon. So our class guides are definitely coming along, and most of those changes are already live if you need any, guidance for 905.
Nice.
Yeah. Did you have any last thoughts on 905 before we discuss a few community stories? Or are you
Mm,
good?
I think we covered most of what I could think of for now. I think
Cool.
it's okay. Just a quick reminder in case anyone just tuned in now, 9:05 has been confirmed for next reset, so that is tomorrow for NA and the day after for EU. And with this, the major change which will affect most players is the Mythic Plus gearing system. So a sort of upgrading system up to item level 220 will be introduced. And apart from that, it's a lot of tuning and changes to certain abilities, certain classes, certain covenant abilities.
Yeah.
And yeah, with that, we can move on to the next topics here. We got some popular community stories.
Yeah, so the first story that was generating a lot of discussion was market research company Superdata, in their monthly digital marketing blog, talked about how player numbers for WoW, of course, did really well at Shadowlands launch, but now they've fallen back down to normal levels, and it's a pretty dramatic drop. But it makes sense in some regards, but it's also different. The
Yeah, because
exact
that's
quote.
yeah.
Yeah, go
So
ahead.
good. I was gonna say yeah, because that's the thing too. It's interesting because it's natural for numbers to fall after expansion has happened, but do they normally fall this much? I was gonna ask you.
Yeah, so the exact quote was World of Warcraft player numbers fell back to normal levels as the excitement around November's Shadowlands expansion subsided.
Mm-hmm.
From November to January, revenue fell by 61% and user numbers declined by 41%. This roughly matches the pattern seen for the past several expansions, though Shadowlands had a bigger launch. So to me, like the normal part is like, okay, yeah, they fell back, the new users went off to their other game, and we're back to the core group. The same core group is still playing. But what I think is, more cause for concern is that Blizzard did a good job bringing more people in at the start, and they didn't seem to be able to retain that as much. Maybe maybe, they got more people that were bored at home with the pandemic, and they got some like brand new people that tried out WoW and then went off to other games.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it goes back to the slower release schedule. Um, you know, normally we'd have something out, or a BlizzCon by now, like a 7-1 that would keep people hype a few months into the expansion. But with when you don't have new content, those numbers fall off. They keep dropping, they don't stabilize.
Mm-hmm.
So it's great that Blizzard still has the core group, but I think that if they had faster patches, they could have retained more of their record Shadowlands audience.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, some parts it's like expected, but then in other parts it's like, a little worrisome that a larger percentage of people, got bored and are trying out other games.
Yeah.
Um,
Because
yeah.
Shadowlands in itself hasn't been that bad of an expansion either. So then it
Mm.
makes you wonder, what does this mean? Were people expecting more, but people are simply just tired of World of Warcraft? I'm trying to imagine the people who may have subbed to play Classic and then decided to stay a little bit longer to try the new expansion, but maybe didn't enjoy it.
Yeah.
And there's not much going on with Classic, so people are kind of waiting for TBC. I think it would be really interesting to actually see the exact subscriber numbers. I know Blizzard doesn't share them anymore, but it would be really interesting to see the sub increase with Classic, and then how that has stayed on as Shadowlands was released, and then Shadowlands also being in a few months now.
I think that the timing of a game launching around Thanksgiving, which is a big spending period in the US, and
Mm-hmm.
then comparing it to January, which is
The
like
least.
a very, yeah, it's like New Year, people have like resolutions not to spend as much, or they spend too much, at Christmas, so they are purposely going lighter in January, or they're trying other resolutions,
Mm-hmm.
exercising more, trying to cut back. I think you're always going to see a dramatic drop. Like, going back to movies, you always have the award-winning movies come out, uh, in the winter, in like the fall winter, but then you have the ones that are flops at the start of the year. So, I think that you also just get like cold feet if you specifically look at January numbers there.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Do you think
but
they
yeah, I do
purposely
think,
release the bad movies at the beginning of the year, or people are just? I guess it becomes a flop because people don't spend the money to go watch it, like in cinemas and stuff.
well, it's
Or
also the way the Oscar deadlines work. Like, if you need to be eligible for an award in a certain year, it cuts off by a certain date. So if they think a
mm,
film's not going to be eligible, they'll put it at the start of the year. Um, you're not going to put an amazing film at the start because people will forget about it by the time award season is over.
oh,
So
yeah,
I mean, of course, that's all been changed with COVID. I sort of wonder. I mean, I don't know what it's like in Sweden, but things are starting to get better in the US, but not. It's not amazing still. I don't live in a great area for it, but they are improving with the vaccine. I wonder if, as more people feel better and can go outside. I'm not saying gamers will, start, you know, leaving their house for, long periods of
hey,
time, but
maybe for Pokemon Go, it's like it's
yeah,
getting a
but
little
I
bit
just,
warmer outside. Time to catch them.
yeah. I mean, you do have to wonder if, as the restrictions ease up, if subscriber numbers will just drop. As I'm sure even people like to marathon game, I'm sure people will be like, oh, like I can see family now, and previously I couldn't, or
Yeah.
like I wasn't able to do something for over a year, like I'm gonna make an effort and go outside and do the thing I was missing. You just
Mm-hmm.
wonder if if people finally can do something after a year, if they'll you know not be as interested in WoW temporarily, especially if you're one of those people that like was stuck at home and got super into WoW. Like we've been seeing more people than usual doing high-end rating in Mythic Plus because they have more time. So you just wonder if people will be like, oh my god, like I went outside, like I'm so glad I'm not obsessing over my keystone for a change. Like, ooh, I really got, a little crazy there in
Yeah.
chat. Um, but yeah, I definitely think we're gonna see some numbers just drop as people decide that maybe after your break it'll be the push to have them try out the gym or go travel or just go
Mm-hmm.
outside, go to a sports game or something like that. So
Mm-hmm.
um
The whole pandemic
yeah.
is like a whole huge topic in itself because
Mm.
we've never had something like this before, right? And we've never had to deal with a pandemic in modern days, I guess we could call it. With
Yeah,
this,
not to this extent.
no. So it's um, it's the first time that people are staying home from school and work and all sorts of different things being shut down, lots of people potentially losing jobs and everything. It's I wonder how in the larger scale of things, let's say 5 years from now or 10 years from now, how that's gonna affect things, because we don't know, like we don't know how this is gonna affect any statistics of anything because this is so new. And
Yeah.
mm-hmm.
So I could see there being a little bit of an economic similarity to when the US had like an economic depression. I think I want to say around 2008. And like job markets were also not good. Like I do think that drove a lot of younger people at the time to play World of Warcraft because it was, very cheap entertainment compared to other things out there. Um and I feel like with the pandemic, WoW is a good way to spend a lot of fun without breaking the bank. And a lot of people have been very stressed. Maybe they have less work,
Mm-hmm.
maybe they've been laid off, or they work part time, or uh, they have just just things are different. You have more expenses during a
Yeah.
pandemic, all sorts of things. And WoW is just a very affordable way to have some leisure time. And yeah, I think I think that's similar why there are people being drawn to it. I think that um we'll have to see, like, will subscriber numbers trend lower for a few years after, then we can be like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
everyone just was into the pandemic, or even
Mm-hmm.
like Wowhead site numbers, like if we look and we're like, oh yeah, we're always doing a great job, but when the pandemic hit, numbers suddenly went up, we could be like, okay, yeah, that's probably due to the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like we worked extra hard a certain month or year. um and also, I guess if we see the patch cycle speed up again, then it will be pretty clear that the pandemic, affected things.
Oh yeah, if
Uh,
things slow down.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
As a silver lining, though, I think that some industries and even some parts of Warcraft, we've seen that they can do very well working remote. And, with all the discussion from a few months ago about how, Irvine is in such an expensive area and, some of the jobs in Blizzard are like underpaid,
Mm-hmm.
for the area. Maybe it's like, well, like you can do this job somewhere else. You don't need to live in Irvine, or maybe you can work an evening shift. You don't have to work a 9 to 5 if you're productive at a different time. Or people could realize, hey, I'm anxious. I do better work when I'm working from home and periodically calling in. Or I
Mm-hmm.
would rather live, I can live wherever for a cheaper cost of living. Or I like
Yeah.
working from home in a city and not having to commute several hours. Like I've earned back valuable free time. I think that we are going to see a big shift as far as like work and productivity that way. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, definitely. And I think you bring up a really interesting topic here, too. The cost of living in Irvine is
mm,
very, very high. And for the people um, who may have been able to keep their jobs and are now no longer traveling to work, may actually have been able to save a lot of money from that, too. So maybe they can see some positives in it. where they dare to hire more people from not necessarily living nearby, and that way maybe create some more variety and be able to get more people in. I think you could.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I think it's important to have different perspectives, especially like
Yeah,
you already need to be someone with some financial stability, which then implies you're from like a certain, like demographic in the US to think about even moving to,
to even consider.
Irvine and
Yeah.
taking a gamble.
Hmm.
And, you're already like, they may say, oh, we're open, like anyone should apply, but you're already like alienating people that
Definitely.
can't afford to take that risk. I don't know if like internships are a thing in Sweden, but there's like it reminds me of this whole internship
Yeah,
culture
some
in the US where
companies might, but it's not as common as US.
you're just meant to like work for free, and it's like, oh, well, you get experience, and it's like, well, yes, well, but you need like your parents to be supporting you because you can't just, you know,
Yep.
intern and not be paid like that already. Some people just might not apply because they can't afford that sort of situation.
Hmm.
So, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the pandemic turns out. I also hope there's like more cleanliness. Like, can we not have a stigma around masks? Like if you're sick, like stay at
Yeah.
home, wash
Yeah.
your hands.
Hmm.
I think hopefully we will learn from that.
Yeah, it's kind
So
of funny because eh, I mean, it's like not funny, but the terror that people feel if they see you sneeze or cough or anything that makes it seem like you might even have a slight cold of any sort, people feeling really terrified and immediately keeping distance and just looking at you weird. Um, it's a funny contrast to how people were so sloppy with hygiene in the past, and you notice now that people want the sanitizers everywhere. People want to be able to wash their hands everywhere, and I feel like I've always been the kind of person who is not super super concerned about it, but I was always a little bit of afraid of germs, I guess, is the best way to put it. So I would always wash my hands. I would never touch door handles and things like that when I'm outside. And it's little things like that I start noticing now from people. People avoiding to touch door handles and people avoiding to touch things that they don't need to touch.
yeah,
And it's
even
so
working
funny
on
to
the
see.
street, like like you're walking and you see like someone and like maybe they're sketchy or it's like a guy that's looking at you weird, and like before if you try to have distance, people be like, oh, like, are you scared of me? Like they would yell at you on the street or they'd be weird, like street harassment. But now it's like, oh, I need to keep my distance away from you. Like, let's be healthy. Let's not, cough or like brush up against each other.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh, like this is nice. Like, I can just like it's good if someone is close by that I'm moving away. Like I'm not seen as, like an anti social person. Like more people are like attuned when someone is like being creepy and being close to you. Like it really emphasizes how like weird
Yeah.
it is.
It,
So
it's funny you say that because in Sweden we automatically have this sort of space bubble thing that you shouldn't really cross. I think it's one of the more, I guess, distant socializing in the world.
right.
So a lot of the things that are new for many people is like very common in Sweden. If you get on a bus and you see a seat and there's somebody sitting on the next seat, then you avoid that seat. You frantically look for a place where you have two empty seats beside you, so you don't have to sit next to somebody. And now people do that because of the pandemic, but in Sweden it's like it's always been like that. So it's quite funny to see how different actions or different behavior has changed due to the pandemic.
Yeah. So another topic that
Yeah,
created
moving
some
on from
controversy
pandemic.
as well as some humor. The Hall of Fame was under scrutiny because the Horde had it closed and the Alliance was very slow getting it done. And then all of a sudden, it started to fill up with these Alliance Chinese guilds. And looking at Warcraft logs, there was a pattern where it seemed, based on some characters only coming in for the final kills, that there was some RMT going on where people were paying for a boost to get this prestigious, title and kill. Um, it looked pretty clear, but obviously it's not proof if you just have logs. But we broke the story, and it got a lot of attention, as well as people saying like, "Oh, it's cool the Hall of Fame is filled up, but if US or EU guilds did this, we could be banned, so maybe this other region should be to the same, standards, because what happens if, there's like foul play at like the world first level, and like one region can like account share, but like, we can't, like we should, all
Mm-hmm.
regions should just be equal for raids to, set good standards. So the follow up was it came to our attention that NetEase, who distributes WoW in China, started interviewing the Chinese players suspected of,
Yep.
getting this through RMT. And like, it sounds really funny at first because
It
like
does.
we have this call where someone is like, NetEase is calling me. Like, can I refuse to answer the call? Oh no, I'm suspended. And then like, it's stuff like what causes the boss to phase, like is there a blood price in phase 3? Like, how many Kabbalists are in
Imagine.
phase 2? Like,
Yeah, imagine like, hey, like Blizzard just called me asking me about Cyoganathrius Mythic fight, and yeah, I don't know the answers or something.
yeah.
It's
But
like
it's like,
I
oh,
don't know, I don't remember. It was
congrats
last week.
on your achievement. Like, how did you get Gladiator? Like, what's the hardest composition? Like, it's just,
Yeah,
it sounds
what
really
comp did you
funny.
play?
Yeah. So, big thanks to some of the Chinese players on our Discord for helping with translations. But, uh, yeah, yeah, it's interesting because obviously RMT has been going on in China for years, and it seems that by this being a bigger story, being more international, maybe they were pressured by Blizzard to finally take some action. I mean, it's really hard to eradicate. It's sort of like the discussion with bots, you know in classic. It's like, how do you eradicate something that the technology doesn't seem to keep up with, as well as just the social aspect of the game.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's also, there's been some discussion that even though NetEase took action, that uh the punishments were not as severe as Blizzard would take in the West.
Oh yeah.
So like some people were saying, oh, I only got a few days. um
Yeah, it looks
and
here like
yeah.
it says the actions taken by NetEase appear to range from only deleting the achievement to 3 or 7 day suspensions. And I feel like if this
Yeah,
was in the West, Blizzard would have given people, um, I would say at least a 6 month ban or something.
especially like a top guild. If the
Yeah,
top guild was doing this,
yeah,
it would
exactly.
be
That's a
like,
good
oh,
point too.
the
Yeah.
perceptions, like you're not, it's not just that you're doing something wrong, it's that
Mm-hmm.
you are like a pillar of the community that is, encouraging this behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And they would try to do something bigger to like make an example of you.
Mm-hmm.
Um but yeah, so like I said, it just brings in like more questions. Obviously Blizzard does not run the first race, and there's the starting time zone discrepancies. But when people say, oh, the NetEase bans are lighter than they would be if the West did this, people are just like, well, what happens if they account share, or they ask one of their fans that has, if a fight needs like 10 warlocks, and they don't have 10 warlocks, they could just share someone else's account, like, and would
Wait, so
they
is
get
account
cracked down on
sharing
it?
allowed over there, or is it just not
No, people are just
punished?
speculating that, like, it used to happen in the West. Like, I think there was that famous example of like, oh yeah, we all account shared on Spine of
Yeah.
Deathwing, or
Yeah. Yeah.
like before streaming was a thing, it happened. So I think
Mm-hmm.
people are just saying it's good to be consistent with bans before people start thinking, oh well, I'm in a region where you know we don't get bans for a competitive edge, should maybe
Yeah.
we should do X, and then
Yeah.
it gets really sticky.
Mm-hmm.
So it's probably good to be consistent about this before we get to a situation where it could, impact, like bigger entertainment, or esports. And this, this also, like, it's not just Race to World First that Blizzard doesn't maintain. Like, with the brackets being changed for MDI, people might want to make sure that bans are being properly handled in a region if they're competing against players that maybe could have some advantages that people are scared they can't do in another region. So
Mm-hmm.
but yeah,
There's another picture here that's kind of funny.
yeah,
You can
that was
continue saying what you were saying.
oh yeah, and I'm just saying it's funny having the interviews, but it's just yeah, it's um I think it's just good to be consistent across regions,
Mm-hmm.
and not have Hall of Fame be faction
Yeah, I
locked.
think that is a huge thing as well.
Because when the
Poor
story first
alliance.
broke, people were all like, "Oh, like the Chinese trying to help close Hall of Fame by, like selling slots and trying to knock this out." But then you look at the data and you're like, "Oh no, there's like similar
Yep.
behavior on the Horde side. It's just the Hall of Fame was like a unintended perk of all this boosting."
Yep. I'm looking at this one here of somebody's story who says my friend got called as well,
Oh yeah.
asking him why his 8 characters are doing raid at the same time. He said I'm just so good with playing 8 characters at once. Then he got banned.
Yeah, so that was another story. Like, when we broke the news, we did not expect Netties to start calling people, but
Yep.
that was an interesting follow up. And since then, we've actually had some people reaching out about other interesting stories in China, like the like, not a lot of add-ons are managers are localized or intuitive to use if you're in China. So the one manager that's been doing localization just added a paywall and download speed caps. And so like like a lot of people are just like wow, like that really sucks. Like I'm glad we don't have that in the US, that we just have basic supporter programs that support this. So
Yeah.
it's definitely interesting to learn about these things as we try to get more global in playing together.
Mm-hmm.
um and yeah, our final story was an interesting classic survey. It had some TBC questions that we've covered before. But the really interesting part was they were talking about significant changes or new features, what players would think of that on the classic era servers. So the classic era server is the one that stays in like vanilla WoW. It does not go into TBC. And at BlizzCon, people were asking about the potential to like have fresh servers, or like you start from phase one again, but maybe with some quality of life changes. So this survey was very interesting because it was very controversial.
Mm-hmm.
Because you know, um, Blizzard was like, here are some new features they might do, and they're like very highly contested things, like you know, how would you feel if classic servers would have layering for high populations, or changes to the PvP, honor system? Would you be interested in playing a server that had quality of life changes, or significant game changes? And at one point, they even had a question saying, how do you feel about the statement? Classic era servers may include new content that differs from the experience in original WoW.
Yeah. Yeah, this is an interesting one.
Yeah,
New content. So does that mean we're gonna get all new raids that were never released at the time, perhaps, or maybe completely new?
right.
It sounds like there's new things that could be potentially added to the servers, which makes it kind of like Classic Plus, I guess.
Yeah, or maybe it would be like you can, start from phase one again, but the PvP honor system will be different now. Or
Mm-hmm.
Chinese servers tested out a thing where you could get Rallying Cry of the Dragon Slayer without turning in a head. So maybe you could go do the raids again, but you wouldn't have to
Oh yeah, like
do
the
the
buffing
weird
will be
like world
easier.
buff
Yeah.
raid logging
Mm-hmm.
situation.
Because you just talk to the
Um,
NPC and you
yeah,
get the buff.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe those were some things they're thinking of because TBC is kind of like hashtag some changes where there are earlier versions of pre-nerf bosses. They want to adjust the leatherworking drums. They want to make like LFG more modern. But maybe they're thinking that they should do some of that with classic instead. Like if they don't want 20 leather workers in TBC, then by that logic, they wouldn't want people, like what 20 characters with Dragon Slayer, heads to turn in and everyone raid logging.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's interesting that they're thinking about this. And yeah, I would be excited if they did fresh servers, and maybe let people play with some of these changes to make like the game feel less like exploitative. I still wish they could do something about the bots. I think that's like the main
Yeah.
problem with that. Um, but yeah,
Yeah, here
it's
you get the questions lined up like this as well.
yeah.
Which version of Classic Era servers would you be most interested in playing on?
Mm-hmm.
Classic Era with no changes, Classic Era with quality of life changes, so that could potentially, involve things like being able to grab a world buff by just talking to NPC.
Mm-hmm.
Um, or Classic Era with significant game changes, potentially new content, or changes to current systems like the PvP honor system, or none of these. It's
Yeah.
really interesting that
So
it's being given as an option.
yeah, and of course, like it's weird. Like there are these surveys that always get, Blizzard's like, oh, don't tell anyone about this survey, but then they like always just get sent to Wowhead.
Yeah.
Like this is a very similar survey to how we learned about TBC happening. So I feel like if Blizzard is asking about something, that means that they're going to pursue it in some way.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
maybe now that they've like figured out how to replicate the old version of the game well, which was a big struggle in Classic, now maybe they have the bandwidth to be like, well, we know how to replicate the game. Like, let's think about how we can, tweak things.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe they've learned that people don't necessarily want to move on to TBC, or they will, but they still want to speed run Nax and speed run all these other things. And maybe they're like, oh yeah, we should actually maintain Classic more than we expected. Let's see what we can do about it.
Yep.
Of course, like the dream, when you read the thing about may include new content, everyone's like, oh, like include the Emerald Dream or the
Yeah.
Ashara crater, or open up Hydra. Like people always want those sorts of things. I'm not sure if they'll ever do that. Like maybe break glass in case of emergency. If like I don't know, like Shadowlands is mega delayed, they could be like, oh yeah, like new classic thing to explore. But I don't.
Yeah.
I think it would be really exciting to uh see more of those classic era systems developed.
Yeah. I think initially it's probably mostly going to be changes that affects the game as it is.
Mm-hmm.
But I think seeing new raid content is something, or instance content could be possible, but probably not before TBC or Shadowlands are already played thoroughly, because it's not something that Classic needs right now, and I think it takes a lot of work from
Also,
Blizzard.
are we gonna get like BFA classic in 10 years? Like,
I
I
hope
mean, like,
not.
what's the end? What's the vision for that?
For
Like, it's
me,
just
the end is
yeah, no,
Wrath.
yeah. Like, I think I feel like Cataclysm changed things too much, but keeping it to the old school Azeroth world, you can't replicate. In the modern game, is a good break point. Um, and it's a good story arc as well with the defeat of Arthas, and maybe people will be like, oh yeah, Arthas and Shadowlands. But
It
yeah,
is, but
I
would
do
they
hope
stop?
that
I mean, they could continue, right? If people play at the end of the day, like Blizzard probably doesn't know themselves, right? They'll probably look at
right.
how popular it is, and once people play through Wrath And if they want to continue playing their character, what then?
Yeah. I mean, but it's like Cataclysm just changed so many things that I feel like at
It
that point
did.
to be like, oh yeah, like like well, it's like it changed of the zones, and like Mop totally changed the talent calculator, so you don't know if people would want to play that. I feel like at that point they might want to make sure that all their old servers let you easily play characters. Because I can see people being like, well, I just want to keep doing the old world content, with the old looking zones, and I don't want to have to play with my friends in Cataclysm. Like I hated Cataclysm. Yeah, I can see people wanting to cling to the past, but that's probably in 10 years from now.
So you mean like being stuck in Wrath instead?
Yeah, like I can see people being like, oh, like every year maybe WoW classic servers reset, like it goes back to phase 1 molten core. Like I can see people wanting
Mm-hmm.
the option to just keep replaying through classic as opposed
Mm-hmm.
to feeling like forced into cataclysm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And they kind of gave us that option now, right? Because you can play the classic era, or you can play TBC. Although we don't have the reset button. They did say that they might introduce some new servers where that will be the case, like a sort of
Yeah.
restarted cycle. But for the normal servers, you're just in classic. And I think it's also interesting that they had to name it something. It's not just, yeah, this server stays classic. It's
Right.
specifically classic era. They
Mm.
named it. They put effort into naming it something. And for me, that
Yeah.
sounds like, well, that's because there's going to be a TBC era and maybe a Wrath
Right.
era. Like,
Yeah,
why else
I
would
can see
they
that.
put a name on it? But maybe, I don't know. I guess we'll see.
Going back to the super data report, I didn't quote this part before, but they were saying that, oh, Shadowlands is down, but Blizzard seems to have found, another source of interest in, these like legacy re-releases every other year.
Hmm.
So, maybe Blizzard will be like, oh yeah, like this is now a major driving force of our plan. It's not just like a little side project. Let's build this out into a full branch of our game, so it doesn't feel as much of like an afterthought, or like, oh yeah, just autopilot, a new patch comes out.
Hmm.
um but yeah, obviously, some things I wouldn't want to see on classic, but I think fresh servers would be interesting, so we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, I think it's nice to
uh
give people a chance to restart. Kind of like having seasons in a way. Like first season classic
yeah,
and the second season
like
classic.
Diablo. Turn like Diablo. WoW Classic have seasons and like
Yeah.
make some tweaks, like
Maybe make the
hopefully
raids
make
slightly
things
harder.
better.
Like the earlier
Yeah.
raids.
Yeah, like if they're like, oh, we were surprised things fell over in Classic, we're gonna make things harder in TBC.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, like wouldn't it be interesting if there was a harder version of WoW,
Yeah.
of WoW
Of
Classic?
classic, yeah. Maybe the new
Um,
servers, maybe that's why they're not introducing new servers straight away because they're thinking
yeah.
something along those lines. Since they are considering TBC servers and they are already giving us pre nerf versions of all the bosses.
Hmm.
Um, and maybe they're considering that for classic too. So for now, they're just gonna look at the numbers and statistics and see how many people are staying in classic. And then once they have done that, then they'll be like, okay, guys, we're gonna make a new server now, and this server is gonna be harder. It's gonna be pre-nerf everything, and maybe they'll remove some items from the game that are like OP throughout all
Yeah, I
phases.
always thought, I mean, it was always weird how you had the itemization from the end of the expansion
Yeah.
available at the start.
Mhm.
That always felt kind of weird because, the itemization was like it got better over time.
Mhm.
Or even at launch, you had a lot of items available from like Molten Core that you wouldn't have until like patch 1.5 or 6. Like there was a lot of inconsistencies in what
Mhm.
was and wasn't available. But there was some like, I think even some recipes from like 1.9 that were in at launch, which was just seems strange.
Mhm.
So maybe if they have like the classic era servers as like a test bed for upcoming changes they could do for like TBC or Wrath, that could be
Mhm.
interesting.
Mhm.
um people on retail are always find it interesting when like class balance changes. Maybe they would I don't know, change balance between patches as well. I wonder what they'll do about legendaries. Like they were really OP uh in TBC, for fighting things like Brutalis, as and PvP was also heavily dominated by needing someone with, a full Warglaive set to attack the other team. So I wonder if they'd be wanting to do some balance there as well. Um
Yeah.
I mean, obviously they're rare, but just with how, with how esports is now and how people make their
Mm-hmm.
own tournaments and Blizzard has as well, it's not really fun to be like, okay, the person with the Warglaives is like just going to win, even if they're not very
Well, I
good.
guess you could ban
So,
those weapons, I suppose, if it's like private
yeah.
tournaments. Um, but yeah, I do think that they're a lot more open now to tweaks here and there for the game. Hashtag some changes, no longer no changes. It's going to be interesting to see how many of those changes they will be making. And it's really funny because everything started with no changes, and now like everyone is kind of agreeing to some changes. So it's kind of funny how like the game is gonna transition to what retail is anyways.
Right. Yeah.
And it's like you think you do, but you don't. I guess so. But it was a fun experience, okay? So I wanted to play through it.
Yeah.
On one of
So,
the the survey pages, there's
mhm,
examples here of what they consider significant changes or new features, which
mhm,
is they said, for example, layering for high populations and changes to the PvP honor system. So these are things that have been no-nos about Classic.
mhm,
They don't want layering because part of the Classic experience is the being able to see everyone who is there. Um, and changes to the PvP honor system could also be quite significant because it would change how to obtain the different titles, for example, if that is the
yeah.
that is
I
the
mean, I
case.
want to see something more about botting because, yeah, the classic experience is that you see everyone, but, there are so many people saying, oh, I return classic like a casual, later on, and, everything's dead around me. Everyone is just instance farming, and, we've seen, or, just speed, is getting speed leveled in a dungeon to max level, and, we've seen, that it's really difficult to report bots in
Yep.
dungeons, with the interface. It's, especially difficult in instances.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and if it's talking about, oh, you want to see everyone in the world, it's like, well, are you really seeing people at max level if everyone feels compelled to log after the raid to preserve their world buffs? Um, so I while I think that they may want to look at other parts of the game as well to be like, is anything else detracting from the quote classic experience?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
uh hopefully we will see updates soon. I know everyone thinks that TBC is coming like super soon, and I think the alpha could be soon, but again, going back to BlizzCon line, that TBC panel did not feel very meaty. It was sort of like a podcast
It
round
was.
table.
Yeah.
So, when I see that, I don't think, oh yeah, this is like ready to launch in a month,
Mm-hmm.
especially when they're, sounding a little wishy-washy on, what content is coming in what phase.
Mm-hmm.
Um
It sounded
so
like it's gonna be easier to create compared to Classic because
yeah.
they had the I don't remember how they put it with the technicalities, but apparently they had a somewhat working version of TBC, which they didn't really have for Classic. Um, so they could compare numbers and things easily with the new one that they're creating with the new foundation.
Mhm.
But there were some mismatches here and there where a character thinks it's wearing clothes, but it's not. So some coding polishing is needed to make that work, to transfer the data from, language A to language B. Well, we don't want to make it visible that Google Translate has been used. And once they have that sorted, I think that process on its own is faster than Classic has been, and also I
Mhm.
think they've learned a lot from Classic to know how to deal with things for
Yeah,
TBC.
I think as well as keeping people engaged, like, obviously it's great they've got, the hardcore audience that will, race and feels passionately about the game, but, there was like, Blizzard is a big corporation and they must feel bad that they had this big hype surrounding launch, and then it just was like dead. Like, I remember people were memeing how when at the demo booth, like the year afterwards for like phase 2 or 3 was being tested, and like no one was interested in the classic
Yeah.
demo at
Well.
all.
Mm-hmm.
And like, even like things like the Gates of Encourage, like it was so hype, but then like you look at Twitch and people are just like, for the most part, it was like there were some servers where it was like funny where they were fighting against each other, but for most servers it was just like, oh, and like AQ was, cleared in an hour, and even that
Yeah.
was worthy because, one boss bug. Like, it's, a
Yeah.
lot of people I think it was hard to get people rejoining classic in various phases, or recapturing the magic, like we were talking earlier, how in retail people might rejoin for a patch or like play through the new story, and it's hard to just get that increase again in classic.
Yeah. And I think bosses falling over is part of it because we have to remember that it takes time to level in Classic. And then if
Mm.
while you're leveling, you hear that, Ragnaros is already down after X amount of minutes, it's a bit demotivating to continue. Because part of getting to max level and experiencing maybe have some moments stepping into the raid, and then eventually witnessing people clearing it is much cooler. And I think from a difficulty perspective, the only one that was even considerable in difficulty was Nax, and Nax kind of came out at the same time as Shadowlands. So then that raid was overshadowed by a retail expansion coming out. So it kind of just killed the entire hype of Classic. I think if the previous raids had been a little bit more difficult, it would have potentially maybe kept a little bit more interest for people. No one bothers to level up or gear up because suddenly it's a new raid and everyone is killing everything.
Yeah, and you don't want to feel like you can only do classic if you have like enough time to grind out PvP for the best, weapon, or like just have a huge time commitment to, try to speed run and do things at the very high level. Like, a lot of the defining feature of vanilla was just doing things with friends and maybe not being great and things taking a while. It's like it was about the journey. So, you don't want people to be like, oh, I'd like to experience this, but you know I can't like, grind. I can't like play every single day, or like will people be mad like I'm not at the top for PvP.
Yeah, and I mean also in the way that Classic works is it takes time to get gear, right? So if
Yeah.
raids and bosses are just falling over and then a new raid is out and now everyone is doing this raid, it's really difficult to get into it as well as a fresh 60. It's difficult to be accepted because at this point, if you don't have Thunder Fury, if you don't have this and that, you're kind of not welcome to most guilds.
Right. And with the idea of no changes, it's like, okay, I better roll the right, character, and I need these items, because if I don't have this, I'll be like unwelcome, or I'll be like, I won't have as much strength as other classes. But knowing that there are some changes now, maybe there'll be more like flexibility. At least in TBC, you don't have the intense world buff issue that do in Classic.
Mm-hmm.
And like more specs are viable. So it's not just like, be a warrior, the end.
Yeah. Also, I think TBC brings some more balancing, which will be interesting because then even some of the current dead specs, so to speak, will become better. So I think we'll see a bit more variety in what people play, and also the smaller raid size will also probably make it a bit easier for people to keep a guild together because throughout the course of Classic, you
Yeah,
see a
40
lot of
is a
guilds
lot.
disbanding.
Mm.
For every raid tier, it's like this guild has disbanded. The next raid tier, this guild has disbanded, and in the end, there's not that many guilds left.
Yeah. So I think that about wraps up the show.
It
Stay
does.
tuned for a lot of class guide updates on Wowhead. don't know why Bright Paw. Let me pick him up. He needs
Yeah,
to make
sure.
an appearance. 1 second.
Sure. We got Luna laying here, sleeping.
Bright Paw, you're making an
Can see her
appearance.
white
Hello.
paws sticking out.
Hello, Bright
1,
Paw.
2, 3. Not sure where the last one is. Maybe here?
Come on, baby.
Or maybe that's the cat tree. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Thank you guys very much for watching. Yeah, and hopefully we'll get to see Brightpaw here for a moment too.
Yeah, the cat.
And yeah, we have some subs to shout out too, actually. Let me open that.
Okay, we have a cat. So he
Hello,
didn't join
Brightpaw.
for the intro. So now we have a Bright Paw.
Yeah, so he's here for the outro. Perfect timing. So
What do you
Brightpaw
think
can
of
also be
my
here
Bright
to
Paw?
cheer for the resubs that we got.
Yeah. Come on, Bright Paw.
We got a 38-month resub from Aegis,
Oh.
who is in the chat right now, actually. Aegis, shout out to him, actually, for also helping us a lot with, you know, putting notes of things for us to keep track of, and also providing us with timestamps for the YouTubes a lot of the time.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. And then we also got a 12-month resub from Taylor. So that's a whole year now from him.
Yay.
Thank you very much. And a 6-month resub from IXZORN. Thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Bright Paw is dancing. Look at him dance.
Brightpaw is happy. Yay! Mommy is done with this soon, so she can give me attention. Do you think you're able to high five?
I think so. Okay, so yeah, I think we're good. I
Awesome.
can hold him in one hand.
Yeah. Oh, okay. You go for it.
We should do, yeah, okay. 3, 2, 1.
Hey, you did it.
And he's looking at my hand.
Like, what are you doing, human? There's no
I'm
one
giving
there.
him
What are
a
you
Bright Paw
high-fiving?
high five. Yeah, look, Bright Paw, you can do it. 1, 2, 3. Boom.
Aww.
Yeah.
I'm gonna do one in the air with Luna here. Okay.
Aw.
3, 2, 1. Boop. Everyone is high-fived now.
Yeah, he's
Aww, it's
scratching my
high-fiving
face.
your face now.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll be back next week. Talk about all the things between now and then. Thank you guys again for watching, and thank you guys for supporting. Almost said reporting. Yeah, thank you for reporting, Wowhead. Thank you for supporting Wowhead, both here on the Wowhead Weekly Show and on the website as well. Yeah, really appreciate you guys for helping to keep Wowhead doing what it's good at, you know?
Yeah, and thanks for all the 905 support we've seen so far to our guide writers and our Covenant and Legendary. We really appreciate all the support and try to make all those patches as good as possible.
Yes, and good shout from Aelid as well. Back up your retail add-on folders. 905 drops tomorrow or day after for EU. So protect your add-ons. Yes, that's a good shout. A lot of times things just break whenever there's a new patch. But yeah, see you all next week.
Yeah.
Thank you guys again for watching, and yeah,
Yep, see you.
until next
Bye.
time. Bye.
Bye.
Little bright paw.